wouldn't say that the Russians are uninterested in bringing this thing to a resolution. What I would say is right now, the Russians are asking for a certain set of requirements, a certain set of concessions in order to end the conflict. We think they're asking for too much.
I think we're close. The one man who can deliver it, I believe, is President Trump, as long as Putin agrees, and that's one of probably our impediment to progress, is the president of Russia right now not agreeing to it.
Vice President J.D. Vance and Special Envoy to Russia and Ukraine Keith Kellogg blaming President Vladimir Putin for being an obstacle to peace when it comes to ending the war in Ukraine. Here at the Vatican this morning, Pope Leo XIV called for a just and lasting peace between Ukraine and Russia as the extraordinary scene played out earlier this week with the selection of the first American pope. I was far away in Moscow, witnessing a very different and yet also extraordinary scene in Red Square. Vladimir Putin throwing a massive military parade to commemorate the 80th anniversary of the end of World War II. That show of force coming at one of the most consequential moments in the war between Ukraine and Russia, with President Trump this morning saying this could be a potentially great day for Russia and Ukraine as Vladimir Putin offers to resume negotiations with Ukraine. But judging by what the Russians told me this week, we are still a long way from a peace agreement.
It was a massive display of military muscle. Row after row of goose-stepping soldiers, more than 11,000 Russian and foreign troops marching across Moscow's Red Square, all under the gaze of Vladimir Putin and his special guest, China's President Xi. Tanks, artillery, and missiles rolling before them, and fighter jets soaring above. There are troops from all over the world here in Red Square today, but the largest contingent of foreign troops from China. Putin celebrating military victories of the past, the Soviet Union's defeat of Nazi Germany 80 years ago, but keenly aware of the mounting pressure to end the war he started more than 3 years ago in Ukraine. Just weeks ago, President Trump calling for Russia to accept a 30-day ceasefire, to which Ukraine had already agreed. This weekend, leaders from France, Britain, Germany, Poland traveled to Kyiv to show their support for the plan and for President Zelensky. In this image, talking by phone to President Trump. Top administration officials have been saying it is Putin who is the impediment to progress after Trump said weeks ago a deal was close. Overnight, Putin releasing a statement essentially dismissing an immediate ceasefire, suggesting instead rekindling direct negotiations in Turkey this week, something his spokesman Dmitry Peskov had floated to us in the Kremlin before the parade.
President Putin is open for peace negotiations without any preconditions. And this is what he was proposing for the last couple of weeks. He keeps saying that we are ready for negotiations, for direct negotiations with the Ukraine.
But direct negotiations is different than being very close to a deal, as President Trump said. Were you close to a deal?
Yes. Well, Ukraine settlement is a very complicated thing. It is not as simple as to sign one paper, A4 size, and proclaim it a deal. That's a settlement process full of tiny details. And each of that detail is vitally important for the future of both Russia and Ukraine.
Earlier this year, it was Ukraine that President Trump was publicly blaming for a lack of progress. But after that remarkable meeting with President Zelensky in the Vatican for the funeral of Pope Francis, the blame shifted.
What did you think when you saw those images?
Well, of course, we thought that President Trump was going to use his enormous influence over Ukraine to get Ukraine closer to the idea of negotiations. Ukraine is trying to escape from negotiations.
It was shortly after that meeting with Zelensky that Trump started to change his tune, suggesting that Putin may be just stringing them along.
No, this is not correct. This is not correct. President Putin is doing whatever is possible to solve the problem, to achieve a settlement through peaceful and diplomatic means. But having no peaceful and diplomatic means at hand, we have to continue military operation.
Peskov was insistent that he did not want to talk details of a possible ceasefire agreement or peace agreement, but was very clear about what terms the Russians would not accept, including weapons sent to Ukraine.
If we speak about ceasefire, what are we going to do with the shipments of weapons coming every day from the United States and from European countries?
So you want those
What are we
weapons
going to
stopped?
do? Otherwise,
Coming
it will
in.
be advantage for Ukraine.
They will not accept NATO membership for Ukraine.
We cannot allow NATO's military infrastructure to get that close to our borders.
And as for a peacekeeping force after any ceasefire,
Could you accept European security forces, peacekeepers,
No, we
inside
cannot.
Ukraine? You cannot do
No.
that. So the land that Russia has already taken, the territory that they've taken since 2022, plus recognition that Crimea, that the U.S. would
Plus
recognize
Crimea,
that, is
yes.
that not enough?
Again, you are trying to speak about details. We're not going to do that.
but the pressure is not just from outside Russia to join a ceasefire, it comes from within as well. Russian officials will not talk about the number of Russian soldiers who have been killed in this war, but you walk around the city and you can see shrines to fallen soldiers. By some estimates, some 200,000 Russian soldiers have been killed fighting in Ukraine, numbers the Russians deny. In a small town about an hour outside of Moscow, I met Inara. Her husband headed into the fight shortly after their wedding. He was wounded by shrapnel on the Ukrainian battlefield, but has now returned to the front lines. The Russian soldier had signed up to fight for just a year, but because of a law signed by Putin, he now has to fight until the war ends. Pregnant with their first child, Inara says she strongly supports Russia and President Putin, but she worries about her husband daily and wants him to come home. So you don't know whether you're going back? And this is Andrei, a pediatrician turned war medic. He has seen the grim reality up close. Like Inara, he supports his president, but when I ask him about what he has seen on the battlefield, he said,
Enough.
enough. Andrei wants to see a ceasefire and thinks the decades of tensions between the two countries is a tragedy.